Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Town of LaGrange Planning Board meeting for February 4th, 2021. This virtual meeting is being held under the auspices of Executive Order 202.1 issued by Governor Andrew Cuomo of the state of New York as a way to remain in compliance with the stay home, stay safe mandates while continuing to carry out town business. In keeping with this order, this meeting is being recorded, and the recording will later be posted on the town website. This meeting and public access procedures by computer and telephone have been announced on the town website and referenced on the town electronic message board on Stringham Road. The public should be aware that public comments are only permitted during the public hearing portion of a meeting. And as there are no public hearings tonight, there will be no opportunity for the public input, and we ask that you please remain muted. The last time this particular topic was before the planning board was in 2009, so most of the board, including myself, were not present for that. So the main purpose of this meeting is informational and to update the planning board on the project and how it may have changed since 2009. Again, the public should be aware that while the planning board can ask questions tonight, there is no opportunity for the public to ask questions or comment at this time. There will be a public hearing on this application later in the process, and we encourage you to save your questions and ask them at the appropriate time. So before we get started on our LaGrange Town Center, I just want to remind the town planning board that we currently have a site visit scheduled for this Saturday at 24 Farmview Road at 10 a.m. And hopefully you folks can make it out there. I'll be there myself. 10 a.m. 24 Farmview Road, which is
and bring your snowshoes. Snowshoes
and yeah, warm boots, warm clothes, and we'll take a look at that. So now we're to the reason why we're here is the special meeting on the LaGrange Town Center, and I would like to point out that we're not considering any action or decisions tonight. So I'd ask at this time for the applicant to present what they want to present to us.
Thank you. My name is Stephen Rieger, representing the project. I'm here tonight with my brother Ian and my nephew Dan. Thank you all for coming out on this cold wintry night to a special meeting. I just mean thank you all for coming, for spending your time with us tonight.
That's right.
So we are here.
Can we share the screen?
Yeah,
Should we
please.
share the slide? Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. We're here tonight to present. Oh, I need to share my screen?
No, I need to share mine, but I need permission to do that, I think.
Okay. Sure thing, Bonnie. I was waiting for you to speak up and tell me where you were. Okay, you are now co-host, so you can go ahead and do so.
Okay. Anyway, we're here tonight to present the LaGrange Town Center plan to the planning board. Some of you were either on the board or active in the town when the project went through many planning board meetings, town board meetings, and public hearings. The project is probably new to some of you, so we plan to make a short presentation that will cover the most important aspects of the project. Our team consists of our attorney, Jennifer Van Tile, our planner, Bonnie Von Olsen, our engineer, Anthony Guccione, our traffic engineer, Philip Greeley, and our conservation biologist, Michael Fishman. I'm going to touch just briefly on a few topics and then turn the presentation over to our professionals. The property is bounded by Route 55 to the north, Lauer Road to the west, and Todd Hill Road to the south. We have access points on Route 55 at the existing roundabouts, the westernmost one at Freedom Road, and the next one at McDonald's. There are two existing office buildings on the site, 1100 Route 55 is where M&T Bank is located, so that's right on our site. And 1110 Route 55, where the new library just opened up. And some of you may know Salsa Fresca, the Mexican restaurant. That's in our building as well. The application was commenced after the town advised us that it wanted to enact a new zoning ordinance to create a town center, of which our property was the primary focus. Following that, a laborious process ensued when the town and its consultants, along with Dutchess County Planning, and with some input from our professionals, created the TCB and TCR zoning districts. So our property is zoned TCR to the north along 55, and TCB to the north and TCR to the south. The property in total is about 195 acres. We submitted a draft EIS, and after much review, many town board and planning board meetings, and public hearings, our DEIS was accepted. A key part of the secret review focused on the Route 55 corridor, and DOT has since upgraded that corridor in coordination with our project. They took our project, they kept it in mind when they designed the improvements that they put in. Since then, the most challenging issue we've had to deal with, and the most time-consuming, involved two protected species, the Blandings turtle and the Indiana bat. As you will see, we have taken many steps to benefit the two species on site, but we have also acquired an iron mine, believe it or not, near Lake Champlain, that is the place where more bats hibernate in New York State than anywhere else. And we've also agreed to fund a project with the Wetlands Trust in the town to enhance potential turtle nesting habitat. These measures appear to satisfy both the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. The project itself has been designed using traditional neighborhood design principles and consists of a mixed-use area in the TCB and a residential area in the TCR as provided in the zoning. The focal point of the project is the new town green, just off of 55 in the north. The project is designed to be walkable and somewhat dense to create the energy that is needed, but it also has more than 50% open space. We propose approximately 137,000 square feet of commercial construction, which we anticipate will consist of office, retail, restaurant, and flex uses. Also, there are 608 residential units. 367 of the units are in the TCR area and consist of a variety of single-family and townhome units. There are 241 units in the north in the TCB. This totals the same total that was provided for in the DEIS originally. The units in the TCB will consist of flat units in buildings with elevators, walk-up units in buildings with garages, fourplex units with garages, and apartments on second and third floors of buildings with a commercial use on the first floor, and small townhomes also around the park square. And with that, I turn the presentation to our attorney, Jennifer Van Tuyl.
Jennifer, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much. We do appreciate your holding a special meeting. We understand your agendas are very busy at the regular meeting, so we appreciate the time. As Steve said, we're here to reintroduce the project to you and also explain where we've been for so long and why we've been away. So in reintroducing the project to the board, I think the point that I would emphasize is that there has been so much environmental review to date about this project on both a generic and a site-specific level. Even before the town center zoning was adopted, the town, in cooperation with Dutchess County Planning, prepared a generic EIS to evaluate the potential for the town center zoning district and what the impacts might be. And as part of the study, The town chose to include Steven's property because it was right at the locus of so many community locations, including the high school, the post office, the town hall, and other civic spaces, as you know. Interestingly, that seeker review acknowledged that the property had two main challenges to development. The first being that there were wetlands and other sensitive areas on the site. And the other was that there would have to be coordination with the town in its own direct actions of bringing water and sewer service to the site. But nonetheless, this seeker review prior to the adoption of zoning concluded that all of those impacts could be appropriately addressed, and that because of its location and because of the opportunities it presented great social and economic benefits to the town in terms of building a town center, providing for mixed use, providing multiple housing options, and creating a walkable pedestrian environment that truly could become the center of the town. So after that zoning was adopted back in 2003, 20 years ago, the applicant worked to develop a site-specific proposal for the development of the property, which you see on your screen, and immediately offered to prepare a site-specific environmental impact statement that would go to a much deeper level than the generic analysis as to specific issues on the site. And we proposed, and the planning board proposed, that it would be the lead agency under seeker, as this board normally is on development projects, because you are the agency that has the clearest and broadest jurisdiction over the development of the project. So a POSDEC was adopted. The action was considered a type 1 action because of its size, and the public was involved right from the beginning, and a public scoping session was held to address what issues should be included in the environmental impact statement. It actually took 2 whole years to develop the DEIS for this project, primarily because of what Steve mentioned, that there was so much going on in terms of what the traffic issues were. I think some of you might remember what traffic was like on Route 55 before the roundabouts went in, and it was a very controversial issue. So in the EIS, various alternatives had to be addressed because it wasn't certain that the DOT would choose the roundabout system. So the DEIS was accepted in 2009. And while the DEIS addressed a specific development plan, the one that you just saw on the screen, it also considered alternative build-out scenarios because the build-out period for the project was expected to be approximately 10 years, and it was recognized that changes due to time and the market might change some of the elements of the mixed-use project. So I'll say though that all of the alternatives considered were, of course, mixed-use projects. So the public hearing was held on July 9th of 2009. And I think you've recently received copies of the DEIS, anyone who didn't have it before. And most of the comments actually made during the hearing really did relate to traffic. It was a very controversial issue. But now we're getting to the part where we're going to explain to you where we've been for all these years. And on the very last day of the comment period, the planning board as lead agency received a very long letter from the DEC setting forth multiple concerns relating to wetlands and species. And if you think back to the period 2009, this was just at the time that habitat issues and endangered species issues were beginning to really develop, and there were new species were being put on the list. There was a lot of law developing, as well as practical considerations developing as to how to save species, how to provide for these kinds of things. So that since the project needed substantive permits from DEC for several areas, it was pointless to consider the seeker review process without going to the agency and its related federal agencies to address the concerns and see what type of changes in the project those agencies might want to see in order to find the project approvable. So at this point, to explain the long history of what has gone on in working with those agencies, I'd like to introduce Mike Fishman, the conservation biologist who has accompanied Steve through several generations of development of applicable regulations on species and wetland consideration, who will explain to you the negotiations and discussions with the agencies and the additional measures that have now been incorporated in the project.
Michael, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jennifer, and good evening, everybody. As Jennifer mentioned, I've been working with Steve and the development team since probably about 2010 on some of these environmental issues, and I'll jump right into those. The first and probably primary one that we dealt with was the wetlands on the site. And the map that you're looking at now is a map of the wetlands delineated on the site by TES. And DEC's comment letter in 2009 stated that avoidance of wetland loss is DEC's first priority in protecting wetlands. So we wanted to do as much as we could to avoid impacts. And there were some proposed road crossings of the wetlands. And so those road crossings were intentionally designed with clear span arch culverts so that they crossed over the wetlands rather than through them and don't require any fill in the wetlands for the road crossings, which avoided that impact altogether. However, there are utilities that have to be installed subsurface. And so there's a very, very minor and temporary impact to wetlands for the installation of those utilities in a narrow trench that amounts to 2/100ths of an acre, about roughly 875 square feet of impact. And that's going to be a trench that'll probably be open for no more than about 2 days. The utilities will be laid into the trench. When the trench is excavated, it'll be the native soils will be side cast onto canvas so that it can be replaced. The native soils will then be used to backfill those trenches, and the site will be restored to its pre-construction contours, and then it will be seeded with a native wetland seed mix so that that wetland will have no long-term impacts and will remain intact and will maintain its continuity across the site. We also, initially there had been some walking pathways proposed through the regulated adjacent area to wetlands, the state regulated wetland adjacent area. And DEC really was not happy about that. It's very difficult to make paths like that comply with both the permit issuance and weighing standards for issuance of Article 24 permits in New York State. And in order to make those paths handicapped accessible, for example. And so those paths have been eliminated from the plan. The plan is still pedestrian friendly. The sidewalk network on the site is designed to make it a walking site and a bicycle site in the roads. So we felt that the pedestrian circulation on the site was still very much intact. But what that does is it also minimizes impacts to the regulated state adjacent area to wetlands, which indirectly also protects wetlands. The trenches, I should also add, are not going to have gravel bedding in them. That can create a French drain issue. The Army Corps of Engineers opposes that, so the trenches have been designed to avoid having any gravel bedding. We'll jump into the protected species issues that we dealt with. The two primary species on the site, in fact, the only two listed species on the site were Indiana bat and Blanding's turtle. The Indiana bat, there was an Indiana bat radio tracked to the site in 2006 by the Fish and Wildlife Service and DEC in a study in which I participated with them. And there was one known roost tree identified on the site. It was a dead tree. These bats generally use snags for roosting, and unfortunately, since that time, that tree has actually fallen down. So that tree no longer exists. However, Indiana bats are known to use multiple roost trees within a fairly small range. So we just went with the assumption that they were likely to be using other trees potentially on or near the site. And so we wanted to maintain the integrity of the forest cover on the site as best we could. And so that the conservation measures that we've employed in the plan, which I'll get into in a few minutes, basically focus on that and maintaining the integrity of the forest cover, the connectivity of the forest cover. Then we had the Blandings turtle. The Blandings turtle is a New York state listed threatened species. It has no federal protections currently. And there was a single Blandings turtle was radio tracked to the northeast corner of the site sometime in the late 1980s, early 2000s by DEC. We had an extensive turtle survey conducted by TES in 2004 that should have detected the turtle if it was there, and it did not. However, it's possible that the turtle that was tracked there by DEC was a transient individual. It may have passed through, but we still have to go under the assumption that the site has appropriate habitat that will support the species, and we wanted to be conservative in how we treated the site to make sure that it would maintain that habitat quality. DEC's comment letter from 2009 indicated that for Blandings turtles, the assessment should consider effects of habitat fragmentation and loss of connectivity to potential habitat, including nesting areas. So their primary concerns were maintenance of nesting areas and connectivity across the site so that the turtles could continue to disperse if they so chose to do. Primary concerns, the conservation measures that we proposed focus primarily on creation and maintaining of nesting habitat and maintaining habitat continuity to allow for that dispersal. I should add that there's potential habitat on the site for nesting for Blandings turtles in the form of agricultural fields. However, those agricultural fields are what are sometimes called an ecological trap. Because they're cultivated annually, they're plowed, they're disked and planted, and it's not an organic farming operation, so herbicides and pesticides and fertilizers can be used, and all of those things can have a negative effect on turtles, especially because tilling often happens at the time of year when these turtles are emerging from wetlands to lay eggs. So the current potential nesting habitat on the site, although we don't know whether it's actually used or not, could be a potential ecological trap, and I'll get to that as well. So the conservation measures that we've spent a great deal of time and energy and effort and cost developing through lengthy discussions with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and with DEC include the following, and I'll address the Indiana bat first, and then I'll address the Blandings turtle. For the Indiana bat, probably the primary action was that the applicants have purchased a 52-acre parcel of land up in Essex County that overlies and contains two entrances to what is the largest Indiana bat hibernaculum in the Northeast, Barton Hill Mine. It is a very, very significant ecological site that was potentially in jeopardy because the land above the mine was for sale for development. There was no other regulatory control over that site. It doesn't contain wetlands that would limit its development, so it was potentially a buildable site and included two access points to the mine. The applicant has purchased that property and will be placing it into a conservation easement that will be held by the Lake Champlain Land Trust to conserve that property in perpetuity in its natural state. DEC, in cooperation with this, has installed two gates on the entrances to make sure that people can't get in and vandalize the mines. Tree clearing on the site will be limited between October 31st and March 31st of a given year that clearing is performed. That guarantees that we do not take bats that are roosting in trees, because during that period, the bats are hibernating off-site. Generally, in this region, the bats in this region hibernate over near Rosendale. The tree clearing on the site was minimized to about 20.3 acres. Original concept plans had clearing ranging up to about 45 acres, but that was reduced by the time we got to the DEIS. And so we've minimized that clearing to 20.3 acres, and mature forest will remain on site. A 150-foot buffer around the known roost tree location will be completely undisturbed, and that's to maintain the microclimate and habitat around that tree, other trees around it that could possibly be used by these bats as well. And for 300 feet around the tree, less than 50% of that area will be disturbed. 99 trees of 3 different species will be planted along the wetland corridor that is currently a reed canary grass plain across the middle of the site. And that will provide future potential roost trees for Indiana bats. They use all 3 of those species that are proposed, which include shagbark hickory, red maple, and swamp white oak. We made sure that we diversified the species so that if there happens to be a blight on any one of those species, it doesn't wipe out all the trees. And so that we'll be planting a corridor of trees basically across the center of the site to help connect the existing forested wetlands. And again, that benefits the continuity of habitat across the site. About 7 acres of upland forest on the site will be conserved and protected under conservation easement that will be held by the town of LaGrange. Construction will be limited to daylight hours to avoid disturbing foraging and active bats at night. Dust generation will be controlled through water sprays and inert flocculants. An important factor with bats is night lighting. Outdoor lights will be shielded below the horizontal to minimize light pollution. Lighting near forest edges will also be connected to either timers or motion sensors to minimize the amount of light around forest edges at night. No pesticides or herbicides will be used in stormwater ponds on the site. That helps to maintain both the insect prey base for bats, but also bats drink out of open ponds. And so it will prevent them being exposed to any of those chemicals. And finally, all construction personnel and new residents on the site will be informed about the protected bat species that occur on the site, as well as what to do if the bats are encountered on the site through a pamphlet that we're developing for an education and encounter plan for both the Indiana bat and Blanding's turtles. So now I'll move on to the Blanding's turtles conservation measures. These have been in active development for the full 10 years. Primarily because the requirements that DEC and the guidance that DEC developed for protection of the Blanding's turtles has been updated 3 times over the past 10 years. And each time we've had to upgrade the mitigation that we've proposed. As I indicated earlier with the wetlands, permanent impacts of the wetlands on the site have been avoided. Temporary impacts were limited to 2/100 of an acre, about 871 square feet. That will be purely temporary, about 2 days of disturbance of that wetland, and then it will be backfilled and replanted. Disturbance to the New York State DEC's 100-foot regulated adjacent area to wetlands is limited to the installation of some stormwater outfalls, a short segment of a curb structure, which I'll get to, that's required by DEC to protect Blanding's turtles, and creation and management of nesting habitat for Blanding's turtles, which I'll also describe in more detail, as well as tree plantings to benefit the bats, which I mentioned earlier. The project limiting fence will be erected before clearing commences on the site. That'll prevent accidental encroachment of the turtles into the construction area during construction. Installation of that fence will be monitored by a licensed Blanding's turtle biologist who will monitor the site regularly to make sure that turtles are not within the proposed construction zone. If turtles are encountered during construction, this biologist is on call to come to the site and relocate the turtle out of the construction zone. The project limiting fence on the eastern side of the site will ultimately be replaced by a 12-inch high concrete curb. This was something that DEC requested. A 12-inch concrete curb will prevent the Blanding's turtles from entering any part of the developed portion of the site and that will help to prevent roadkill, help to prevent encounters with pets, help to prevent collection by people if they encounter them. So it basically keeps them to the wetlands on the eastern side of the site, in the northern portion of the site. It does allow them to move across the site in certain corridors that will be maintained, and I'll get to that. Habitat connectivity will be maintained across the site via 4 clear span arch culvert road crossings. I don't know, they don't show on this particular plan. This plan that you're looking at now shows conservation areas. One of the nicest parts about this plan that I see is that more than 50% of the site will be held within a conservation easement. And on this plan, the green hatch that you see is protected wetland that has to be protected by law. The purple areas are wooded conservation areas for the Indiana bats, and you can see they pretty much connect across the site. And the tan areas are a combination of turtle habitat. The narrow corridors along the northern part of the site actually will be planted with trees and will become forested corridors for the bats. But the tan areas are all potential turtle habitat areas that are also connected across the site to allow the turtles to move. Existing areas of early successional habitats on the site over Hoosick soils and Nassau Cardigan complex soils, which are used by the turtles for nesting, will be protected under the site conservation easement. Areas of Hoosick soils on the site that have later successional plant communities, mature shrubs and forest areas, will be cleared and tilled to create potential suitable nesting habitat for Blanding's turtles. There's 4 locations on the site totaling about 4.8 acres that will be monitored and maintained as new nesting habitat for 10 years to see if the turtles are using it for nesting. And that yields a total of 29.9 acres, almost 30 acres of potential Blanding's turtle habitat will be protected on site under the conservation easement. The conservation easement not only protects upland habitats that are not currently regulated or protected, but also adds an additional layer of protection to the New York State DEC regulated adjacent area. As you may know, it is possible to build things in the regulated adjacent area to wetlands under a DEC permit. And we wanted to make sure that the disturbance of the regulated area, regulated adjacent area, would be basically limited only to the stormwater outfalls and to that short length of wall and to habitat development. But other than that, we wanted to make sure that it stayed in a natural state. So all of the DEC regulated adjacent area will fall under the conservation easement and will not be developable in the future. Agricultural activities, of course, on site will no longer occur, which removes the potential risk to Blanding's turtles of being tilled and run over by tractors during nesting season. And off-site, the applicant has negotiated an agreement with the Wetlands Trust to fund the creation, monitoring, and maintenance of 9.1 acres of Blanding's turtle nesting habitat in Hoosick soil areas on the Wetland Trust's Overlook property, which is located about 5 miles north of the site within the town of LaGrange. And this will include the use of electric fencing to keep predators out. It will include regular annual monitoring by a licensed turtle biologist for a period of 10 years. And finally, construction crews and residents will again be informed of, they'll receive a Blanding's Turtle Encounter and Education brochure to inform them about the rare turtles that they may see on site and what to do if they encounter a Blanding's turtle on site, not to disturb the turtles and so on. So this has resulted in a net conservation benefit for both of these species. All of the conservation measures that I've outlined will result in both of these species, in fact, being better off than if the project were not being built. And I can summarize that very shortly. Roost tree locations for Indiana bats, the roost tree location and the surrounding buffer will be protected in perpetuity. Connected habitat corridors across the site and among all of the forested wetlands will be enhanced and protected in perpetuity. Diverse tree species selection will be planted to provide future roost trees and to establish forested connections. Off-site, the largest Indiana bat hibernaculum in the Northeast will now be protected from development activity in perpetuity. And that's a huge, huge positive impact. None of these protections exist currently in the absence of the LaGrange Town Center project. For Blanding's turtle, the current potential threat to turtles from agricultural activity will be eliminated. Future risk of roadkill, pet predation, collection will be prevented by installation of a physical barrier to prevent turtles from moving into the developed area of the site. Almost 4.9 acres of potentially suitable nesting habitat in husic soils will be created on the site. Almost 30 acres of potentially suitable habitat for Blanding's turtle nesting on the site will be protected under the conservation easement. 9.1 acres of potential nesting habitat will be enhanced, managed, monitored, and maintained on the Wetland Trust's overlook property, which is within the town. And a total of 39.04 acres of potential upland nesting habitat will be protected forever and managed for 10 years. All protected wetlands will remain on the site undisturbed, without permanent impact or disturbance. This more than replaces the 38.37 acres of potential nesting habitat that currently exists on the site, which is neither managed, maintained, monitored, or protected. And that's all I have, so I will pass it along to Bonnie.
Thank you, Mike.
And ask a quick question, Mr. Fishman?
Certainly.
What happens after the 10-year period?
The 10-year period is really designed as kind of a control period to be able to manage and monitor the site, to see if any improvements need to be made, to see if the nesting areas, for example, need to be retilled. After that, the sites will be allowed to go through succession naturally. And generally, after a few repeated tillings, it would probably, it's likely that those sites will take 10 to 20 years before they develop vegetation that would preclude them from becoming nesting sites. So it's really not possible to be able to look farther beyond that into the future from the standpoint of how you plan to do that. I think by the time you're down the road 25 years, the people involved in this are retired, but the habitat will still maintain there and on its own for quite some time after the last tilling.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Mike. I'll wrap it up here, I think. My name is Bonnie Von Olson. I'm a planner and landscape architect, and I have been on the team also. I was one of the primary authors of the DEIS, and I'm happy to be here again before the planning board to continue the process. Go to the next slide. So following on what Mike just outlined, this is an exhibit from the DEIS showing the proposed open space. And then since the next step is for us to prepare a final EIS, we will be incorporating all of the measures that Mike just mentioned. And this exhibit will be updated in the FEIS to correlate with the mitigation that's proposed. So this is an example of how in the FEIS, we will update the information where necessary, and how in many cases, due to the work that has been done to refine the plan and to address the agency concerns, the plan has been improved since the DEIS. So back to the DEIS plan, just for reference, we wanted to highlight how the primary design considerations and environmental conditions will remain the same with the FEIS, many of them, including the 2 zoning districts that provide a combination of commercial, civic, residential, and open space uses, the traditional neighborhood design elements, including walkability and connectivity through an extensive sidewalk network, are all still included. Infrastructure improvements proposed in coordination with the town, including water and sanitary sewer and stormwater management per the current New York State DEC regs and requirements. As Steve said earlier, the number of residential units remains the same overall, with some refinements to the unit mix and to increase the variety of unit types in the TCB section of the site, and I'll go over that in a moment. Some of the specific features of the TCB area which will remain that I just wanted to point out, the Beekman Patent Wall that runs in this direction, in this area, the Park Square, the Town Green, and then this is the TCB area that I'm going to refer to, which has been refined. And of course, the open spaces on both sides of the TCB, which Mike has mentioned. So the proposed refinements to the TCB plan shown here are all within the range of alternatives that were described in the DEIS. We're going to walk you through the primary features. Route 55 up here along the north, as you can see, the two new roundabouts that were not there when the DEIS was prepared are shown here. The commercial area along Route 55 is shown with these smaller buildings here. The main artery going north-south, and this main artery also remain the same. This is the area where the Beekman-Patton Wall continues to be proposed to be reconstructed. The retail, flex space, restaurants area all along Route 55 will have a new streetscape. And then the parking is in the core behind the buildings. I'm sorry about that. These are the two existing, can you see my cursor? Hopefully, the two existing buildings here are indicated as E1 and E2.
Yeah, it'd be best if you give numbers because I can't see your map at all. So I've got it on a bigger screen.
Okay.
So it's better if you just give me numbers.
All right. So I'm talking about the easternmost roundabout and the north-south road that goes between, which leads to the town green in the center. And E1 and E2 are the two existing buildings on either side of the part of the town green. And then the main part of the town green still continues to have parking along the side. And it has mixed use buildings that have retail, restaurant, and flex and office space surrounding it. At the end of the terminus of the green is a mixed use building which has retail or commercial below and residential multifamily above. And then
That's
the
number 10.
So the northern part is primarily mixed use and commercial. And then as you transition into the TCR district to the south, becomes entirely residential. These buildings along the diagonal road coming in from the roundabout are proposed to be new multifamily buildings. Some have surface parking, some have parking below, some have elevators. They're 2 stories or 3 stories, designed to sit right on the streetscape as in conformance with the original intent of the new urbanism concepts. And then there's a second core of residential multifamily buildings on the southern end in this area here, which has parking in between the buildings. And then it has the residential frontages of the buildings along the sidewalks and the streets. The other new unit type here is here on the side between the main road and the wetlands buffers. And those are the quads that Steve mentioned. And then there's also small townhomes surrounding the Park Square, which would again have their residential frontage. Their front porch area, so to speak, would be along the park itself, facing the park. And then their garages and car access would be out to the back. There's a new recreation area proposed in this area of the TCB, so that these residents also have a active recreation area. I'm gonna go back to my notes here. The multifamily buildings, as I said, some have parking underneath, some have surface parking, but the intent on all of these is to show a variety of housing types which don't currently exist in the TCR, and to provide new housing opportunities both in the town center and obviously for the community at large. Those are the primary components of the new aspects of the TCB that we're proposing. And with that, I'd like to pass it back to Jennifer to conclude.
Thanks, Bonnie. So the last thing we're here for tonight is to request to proceed to the next step in the seeker process, which is the preparation of this FEIS for your review. So I emphasize, we're not asking the board to approve anything at this time. We are proposing to follow the procedures under the secret process to prepare a draft, but not to get confused with the draft EIS. It's a proposed FEIS for the board's review. And as your attorney will confirm, the FEIS is always considered to be the board's document. So it's your discretion as to what you require to be in that document. We believe that we could have that document prepared in several months, and we would include in that the response to all of the comments that were made at the public hearing, including all of the written comments, and naturally would also include any comments that the board members have at this time of issues that they want to be addressed. And the issues to be addressed in the FEIS would include all those that were part of the DEIS and all relevant environmental issues, including the ones that have been discussed here overtly. But of course, we will have updated traffic studies. And Phil Greeley, our traffic consultant, is here tonight in the event that the board has any questions on that. Updated storm drainage, updated coordination with the town's initiatives on water and sewer, continuing analysis of any specific community character impacts arising out of the design of the project as presently proposed. But in any event, that's what we propose to do. We would request your concurrence that we proceed in that vein, and we're happy to engage any questions or comments that the board might have.
All right, thank you very much for the update and the summary. I know that I had a few opportunities to take a look at a few things, and so I wanted to bring up a couple of things and then pass it to others on the board for them to input. One of the things that I noticed was that the impacts summary comparison chart on pages 12 through 15 of your summary. It was very helpful, but one of the things that we noticed was in several cases, in particular in the residential unit elements, that in specifying what was contained in the DEIS plan for 2009, some of what you document was actually in the alternatives A and B versus the base proposal that was accepted. So I think one thing that we would find helpful is if you could add another column in which you break out that current single column for DEIS plan for 2009 and put in the stuff that was in the proposal and what was in the alternatives. That way we'll get a better apples to apples comparison there. I think it was a little confusing to me, especially being somewhat new to this plan. And as you mentioned at the beginning, the current planning board only consists of 2 members who were around on the board at that time. Others may have listened in as interested parties and so on. But it's going to take us some time to work our way through a lot of this detail. In particular, I'm going to be sending out to the planning board. I received the links to the full DEIS and all the attachments to that. So I'll be sending it out to the planning board on tomorrow so that you can start looking at it on your weekends if you have time. So I know that there were a couple of other things that were brought out. I want to recognize Mark. If you'd like to talk about one or two things that you were brought up earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I had a couple of questions. I'll start with Ms. Van Olsen on the civic building space. I would imagine that was building number 20 on your plan, which was up by the roundabout. Is that correct?
E2.
E2? Okay,
I'm sorry, I was muted. Yes, it's E2.
okay. Is that 43,032 square feet set in stone? Is that a fixed number? And if so, how did you get to it? And can that number be changed to be enhanced to a larger space?
You're talking about the
Civic,
existing building?
the
where
civic
the-
building space, yes.
Yeah, that's where the library has moved into. And so that's an existing building,
Okay.
E2. So Steve, I don't know if you want to address
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, so let me try. So we have proposed uses and spaces, but we intend, and the DEIS provides, that it's a dynamic plan, that nothing is fixed, in that we don't have, until we actually have a user and a site plan, we're not going to be fixed for anything. So if we have a good civic use that is available for the site, we'll certainly try to make it available. We're open to that. Back in the old days, we talked to the town board about perhaps building a town building on the site, but there's been no further conversation about that. So at this point, the only thing that we have designated is, with the library now is going to have about a little more than 10,000 feet. And we have the town green and the park square, which of course are civic outdoor space. But if somebody has another civic use, we're certainly open to it.
So there would be open space, Mr. Rieger, for if a courthouse was to be built, or a police station, or a firehouse was to be located back into town center, that could be accounted for?
We're certainly open to the conversation. We don't want to preclude anything.
Okay, that's good. Great to know. Okay, my second question was on the building aspect. Once you get approvals, how do you plan on starting? Would it be a phasing aspect with the commercial as well as the residential, or would you start in the back? Is your plan to start in the back with total residential, work your way up to 55? And will you limit the phasing to, let's say, for instance, 10%, 10% residential, 5% commercial, and go that route, so we have a good mix of uses at one time?
Yeah, well, we intend to start in both the TCB and the TCR. I mean, it might not be on the same day, but that's our intention. We want the plan to be successful, and I know the town does as well. And to some extent, the market will determine the pace of different types of development. So we believe that we can make the most progress at the beginning in the TCB, because the types of buildings that in our refinement that we have, we believe are very marketable. And, with the current real estate market, having picked up, obviously we think we can make good progress in the TCR as well. So we're hoping to do both. There's a lot of site work to be done. So, it all has to be coordinated, but that's our plan. In the commercial, the buildings along 55, I wish I could predict that. We have had expressions of interest from some very interesting users, but they want to see the people living there, or at least the residential buildings under construction. And so, to some extent, I think it's a chicken and egg. We need the residential to prove our concept to some of the commercial users.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions for now, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mark. Anybody else on the planning board have anything else that you've picked up on that you would like to ask at this time?
I'd like to bring up some things.
Go ahead, Stacy.
Oh, mine's long. Do you want yours? Go first.
Nope, I'm here. I'm fine. Go ahead.
You're good? Okay. You'll just have to bear with me because I wrote all my notes on several sheets of paper.
That's fine.
So I'm going to go with an extension of Mark's question first. Do you ever think about a community pool? I know that the high school has been wanting to be able to get a pool, and so has a number of swim teams in the area have been trying to pull investors in to make a pool. So you might want to consider a pool with either, could be with the school district, could be with these outside investors, but that could also benefit the entire community, not just the residents themselves. And if you want the name of the person that is looking, has been looking for a space to put a pool and collecting investors, I can send that out your way. Because on this side of the river, there are basically no areas for swim teams to practice. So you have Beacon has some area. A lot of the colleges have refused to let local swim teams in. So we on this side of the river have very little places to, everybody's fighting for practice space. Next is, so you mentioned that there's going to be garages under or with the small townhouses. That's not shown on the plan, that garages, it just shows parking in front of all the townhouses. And also,
no, Stacy, actually, I mean, on the scale you're seeing, it might be hard to see, but we, on the townhomes around the Park Square, we propose detached garages, and they're shown.
all the those are the squares out back.
The little rectangles in the behind there, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see them attached. I thought the little bump outs on the townhomes were going to be the garages, and that's why I was going to mention that in town center where we don't want individual garages coming out to the town
Right.
road, that you want them all consolidated. So that's okay then. On Road 48, I think, I don't know, it's over next to building 13 and 14. Just consider, instead of all that parking, because we as the planning board can waive parking to an extent where it can be banked, that it's built at a later date, or we can actually waive a certain percentage of parking once we establish all the sizes. But just on roads like that, it just seems an excessive amount of parking, and it's a straightaway for potential people to drive fast through there or whatever. And it might be better just to eliminate the east side parking and have that just a smaller little road area, because it looks like it's a road, but really technically you're saying that those are all alleys and parking lots. Yeah. And it might calm that a little bit if it's not so big and banked, maybe possibly banked, which is another thing we might need to do. So you might want to look at what can be banked and what needs to be built. Because that banking, the way it works with town center is you show the spaces now, we mark it as they're going to be bank spaces, so it's part of your green landscaping. And then within, I think is it 6 months after you get a letter stating we want you to build the parking in this area or that area, that's when you have to start building it. And that's something to save all the potential, blacktop everywhere until we're actually sure we actually need it. The ones, the 8 and 9 and 6 and 7. So the front yards for all of those are going to be on road E and row C. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, I know you make an alley in the back for driveways, which is what you're supposed to for the garages. But then now I don't have any neighbors across the street from me anymore. It's all on the side streets. Whereas I would think, I wouldn't want my neighbor across the street from me, but that's just an opinion of my own. Because I've been traveling a lot and my children are now all grown. Now it's been 12 years. And I've seen where they've lived in areas and some of the apartments, because we always went apartment shopping for them, that they tended to like the ones where they could walk out their front door and meet with their neighbor, as opposed to walking out onto a main street and never seeing their neighbor, because you're gonna there's no friendly atmosphere. It's a main road. You're on a main road. You don't want to stop and talk to people on the main road. You want to get to where you're going. So that's my thought on those. For 3, 4, and 1 and 2, they all do face each other, correct?
3, 4, and 1 and 2, right? They face each other.
Yeah. Okay.
Great.
Let's see. Number 20, 1 story. So in town center, it says that even if you're going to build a 1 story, that it should actually look like a 2 story, so you can have a fake facade on the top. So you might want, when we're doing the design standards, when we get to that point, you might want to think about that.
Yeah, we understand that.
A big part of when we, because I'm one of those 2 board members that have been here forever, when we went through this zoning and when we went through the DEIS, a big part of that was the designs, the architectural design standards. And even when Hannaford's, which is now, what are they called now? Key Food? Is that what they are now? No.
It's Tops.
Tops. We had them do that, have it look like a 2-story building that looked like it was broken up into different little shops. So, because they wanted, the people that wrote the code wanted it to look a certain way. So I just wanted to put that out there. And again, I talked about parking spaces. Oh, workforce housing. Is any of this going to be workforce housing, which is described in the town code?
Well, there's nothing in the town, in the TCB and TCR zoning about workforce housing.
That's correct, but we
have,
do have a definition of it. So I wanted to know if you were considering any workforce housing in this area.
Right. So we'll take a look at that. We've been more focused on other issues. But we believe that, with the new plan, there will be more opportunity for housing, for people of different means than there was in the original plan.
Yep. So check out 240-112 subsection 238. That's where the definition of what a workforce housing is. Let's see. I did that. Oh, and loading areas. Are you going to have the loading areas for your retail and stuff just being in front of where the parking spaces are, or are you going to have some kind of a separate loading area for the different ones?
Yeah, that's a good question as well.
Yep.
I think what we're going to do.
Well, you don't need to answer these. These are all just, things for you to think about when we move to that next stage.
Okay, great.
But you can if you want. But again, I understand this is always a work in process. And so we've got to, just put these things out there so you can be thinking about them as you're going through the design.
Thank you.
The other thing is, the town center has come into a lot of invasive species now in their wetlands. I don't know if, and I have to go back to my notes. I think your name was Mike. No, Michael?
Yeah, Mike
right?
Fishman.
Yeah. So in all your extensive studies, did you check for stuff like, I know Phragmites is a big thing in our area that is attacking our wetlands. Did you come across any of that and what the DEC wants to do with those, where when it's removed, it's usually hand removed. It's not done with equipment. So it doesn't hurt the wetlands. So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted to see if you've located those and if you guys were going to try to clean up some of that so it doesn't continue to choke out all the wetlands. The next thing is, are any of the wetlands buttonbush ponds? Because those are the turtles' favorite ponds. That was my next question. So if you could just, cover that. I've worked with Hudsonia with the turtle project that's over in the wetlands behind the high school and on James Baird Park. So I've worked with all the turtles that have radios on them. I know extensively. I know their personalities even. So yes, landing turtles have personalities. So if you have any questions when you're working with that part of it, if you want some hands-on actual information specifically the town center, just contact me. My daughter started the research research involvement, I guess, with the high school when she was at the high school in 2009 through 2000, whatever it was, 13. And she's one of the ones that helped develop a lot of our the pamphlets that the DEC gives out now. Their research group helped develop all those. So we have extensive information on the turtles within town center. And trees on site or in the wetlands. Oh, so just out of curiosity, the tree that you found your bat in, was it actually in the agricultural uplands, or was it in the wetlands, or the wet forested area that's off to the east of the site?
Actually, it was more towards the west side of the site.
So it's in the drier section.
In the drier section, kind of at the edge of the woods. Indiana bats like to have direct sun exposure on their roost trees. So they tend to roost in edge trees. And
just to let you know, Hudsonia did do a extensive survey, and I got to witness this, that we took used different type of tilling machines and different hand tilling, rototilling, different types of rototillers all over at the high school site to figure out which one the turtles liked best. So Hudsonia has that information. They also have extensive information on the type of soil and the compaction of soils that the turtles like to nest in at the at that site. Also, they've done a lot of studies in those. And also how deep all the nests are. So so you really, if you, I know
I've referenced Gretchen, a lot of Hudsonia's stuff in my studies. I know Eric pretty well, and he and I have worked together for many years.
Gretchen was the one. Actually, we worked with somebody else, but she's not there anymore. But Gretchen took over her place, and the other thing, I know that Miss Pregnall is the high school teacher that ran the research group. She's no longer at the high school. She has retired, but she is still spearheading the turtle nesting program. And she might even be one, she's trying to be one of the biologists that are the ones that are allowed to work with the Blandings turtles, since she has extensive work with them anyway. She's trying to get that license through the DEC. And she can also give you a lot of information about the turtles in our area and where they have, because we track them with the radios, so you would know if they go. I know they go on the fly sprout, which is it's definitely on the east side. So I've known that they do go under the road in the Fly Sprout Creek. I have tracked them myself there, and we can even tell you which ones go there. But she's a good person to contact for any information you might need with any of those kind of things. Okay. Or if you might want to, offer that she can use your wetlands too, or have permission to go into your wetlands to do her work of, because what this group does is they follow the turtles around. They come out in May and they start looking for, they mate and they start looking for a place to nest, and they nest in May and June. And this group goes out and puts predator guards around all the nests that they find. We track the turtles at night. They do it. They come out about 6 o'clock at night, and they nest between 6 o'clock and about 3 a.m. And then that's those 2 months. Then they go back into the wetlands and they come back out again in August is when the nests hatch. So in August, September, and the beginning of October are when all the nests hatch. So, if you need to know any more, I'm happy. Ms. Pregno will be happy to talk with you on all that. Okay, I think that's it for me. Go ahead, Randy, you're up.
Okay, so today I started my day by a concerned citizen that saw a student could not cross from the church side of 55 over to Arlington High School. So not being familiar with whose responsibility the crosswalk is, I called DOT, and it's Arlington's responsibility on their side, and it's the church's responsibility on their side. So to facilitate this, I got permission. I went out and I cleared the thing myself. But by clearing it myself, I learned that people actually do use these walks and paths, and not everyone is in a vehicle, that people actually do have to walk from one place to another. So in your presentation, you mentioned that you eliminated a lot of paths from the original design. So I'd like to know how many feet of path was eliminated and how many feet of path you've proposed or reconfigured to facilitate the people moving around inside this project. And then Mark touched on, believe it or not, at 59 years old, I do begin to think about the future after me and who's going to take over all this, and that you really should consider a possible location for LaGrange Station 4 if it ever needs to be constructed, because right now we're coming from each side of you to come to this project, which if it's completely built out, we may actually need to have something in the town center. So I would appreciate it if you would just consider that in your thoughts. And that's pretty much it, for now. The state highway and the paths, and after this is built, taking care of it and maintaining it and taking care of potential problems inside here is what we're all here for, to try to make this thing work smoothly and, go off without a hitch. And I would like to touch on the 10-year thing. I've worked on large projects where they've cleared 50 to 100 acres, and the project, because of the economy, stalls. And now we have 50 to 100 acres that's been completely cleared and never built on. So I just want to go over how we're going to build this and not get ahead of ourselves. But I believe you probably have that already covered.
Thank you, Randy. That went to my phasing question. Thank you, Randy, for expanding on that.
Thank you.
Any other planning board members? Dennis, you've been around a while.
Yeah,
Dennis was here.
I know.
I was one of the old timers. I was just wondering, Steve, you talking about proposing a hotel? Was it a 17-room hotel? What do you see that use for in a town like LaGrange?
Yeah, in the original plan, Dennis, there was a hotel. In fact, the largest building, I think, on our plan was a hotel. And like I said before, it was a concept, as something that maybe could be done. And it was always intended that the plan would react to market forces. On the current plan, the refined plan, we've eliminated the hotel. And, because, well, it's hard to think about hotels during a pandemic, but also it's hard to finance hotels. It's hard to be successful in hotels. We're not hotel people. Now, we do have buildings that will have uses. And if somebody who is a hotel operator came to us and said, I'd like to build a hotel in LaGrange Town Center, we would consider it because it's allowed by the zoning. And if they have it's a good operator with a good plan, it's something that should be considered. But at this point, we don't think, in our judgment, we don't think that a hotel is viable today. By the time town center is built out, that might change, and we intend to stay open to all users that make sense to town center, and we'll of course be consulting with the town as opportunities arise.
Right. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, one thought that I had about a potential use for hotels is because I have older children myself, graduation times when they come around, often they bring family from outside the area who would have to travel quite far, potentially, to Arlington High School for a graduation ceremony that's there. If we ever have them live again, who knows? But not that is something that could sustain an operation like that, but just point out that there may be some things like that are possible.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing I wanted to bring up, we talk about all that parking area that's all set aside that Stacy was referencing, and we didn't see anything. It's probably premature, but we'll have to think about snow storage. After this week's snowstorm, I'm striving to figure out where to put all the snow that I'm cleaning up. So,
yeah.
Bringing up that question, so what's being dedicated as town roads and what's not? So is it the ones that are marked like road A, B, C, D, those are dedicated to the town and everything else is privately owned parking lots?
Yeah, in general, that's true. With DEIS provides a concept from when we were working on that. We haven't really changed our thinking on that. We met with Greg and Wanda a couple of weeks ago, and we laid out what we thought made sense, and we'll continue those conversations. As we said before, it's up to the town to decide what roads it wants. We would like the major roads, the more important roads, to be town roads. We think that makes sense.
And Steve, this will be structured as POA and HOA setups. Is that how I imagine it to be?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And just another comment that I remember that I had from before. Up where we're going back into Roundabout on the east side, you're cutting through the green with a road.
Okay, so say that
Yeah,
again.
it's the one
Where are you?
that's I'm between E1 and E2.
Okay,
The north
right.
part of the green
Yeah.
that has the road.
Yeah, you're cutting through the green.
Yeah,
So
part of that green is intended to be a stormwater area.
okay.
And we played around with this, our team, to try to make this movement of cars smooth and safe. And this is what we have so far. But
Okay.
we're open to other
Yeah.
ideas, but the one that I like the best, our traffic guys decided was not safe enough.
Well, I like the idea of the one way in, but that little, I don't know, it just jumps out at me as it's just as easy to go up the block and turn either left to go out the roundabout or turn right and then cut through, the E2's area there and go to the east instead of having the little jog there. That's just extra pavement to me. because it's no difference. I mean, it's not like it's a mile or so out of your way, you know, it's so close.
Mhm.
And just a reminder too, I think, I know we redid the driveway drive-throughs in town center, but it still is not for food. So when you're looking at the number 20 with your drive-through there,
Right.
it's for, you know, banks and that kind of thing. Unless they changed again. Aren't they changing that again?
That was changed, Stacy.
Yeah, they changed it again, right? So it is
Yes.
food now. It
Yes,
is
it
food
is.
now. Yeah. Okay.
And Steve, on the whole site, could you tell us how many areas of egress and ingress there will be to get into in and out of that whole 52 acre plus parcel?
Well, it's 195 acres altogether, but we have on the north side, we have, you know, the two main entrance points at the roundabouts. And then, and you know, and as you can see, there are many interconnected ways to go in that area.
Right. I
Then
see.
there's a single wetlands crossing to get to the TCR to the south, and that was something the DEC was very specific about. That we had to minimize our crossing. And then once we get to the southern portion, I don't have the plan in front of me, but there are a number of places in it. I think there's on our eastern section, there are 2 ways out to Todd Hill Road, and then the connector off to the western section. The western section, there are numerous access to town roads.
Okay, good. So I was concerned a bit with that bottleneck in the center going from the
Yeah.
commercial to the residential with that one drive there.
Right. Yeah, we were concerned about that too, but there's absolutely no way DEC would consider anything more than what we have.
Okay.
They didn't want us to have that.
Really?
And the town and
Yeah,
the
we have to have
DOT,
some through, yeah.
the town and the DOT said that it was required. And
Yep.
so DEC backed down.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And at least Mark, it kind of was, I'll give you some background a little. It's also kind of so it would kind of give you that this is the upper is the town look, you know, the tight town look, and then the other side is your blend into the rural and more spread out lands that are on Lower and Todd Hill and beyond. And so it kind of gave you that's like your transition point.
Mhm.
So that it kind of like eases you into it. It's not like you can get into the larger lots through multiple spots. It does give you a little bit of a bottleneck, but if you're going to be in town, you're going to be in town. If you're going to be in that other section, you're probably going, and you're going to drive to town, you're probably going to go around and come in through closer to where you want to get to.
Okay. Thank you, Stacy.
Yeah. Our
So-
walking trail that you had talked about that you wanted to know where it was, it basically connected the two through a walking path, so that it got you from those large residential lots over into the town center section, sort of, because it went around the site. But I think you said you're going to be providing sidewalks in that first part of is that what your narrative said? You're going to add some
Right.
sidewalks into your residential side so that you can get those residential people into town center through sidewalks?
Right.
Yeah.
We're intending to have sufficient sidewalks that people can walk wherever they want on the sidewalk.
Yeah. So that it's not just in the town center section, it's also over, along the larger lot section.
Right.
Yeah, and the southern end also has multiple loops. It's not like there's dead ends. It's part of the design that, everything's interconnected.
So,
And go ahead, Mark. I mean, Chris.
yeah, I was just, I don't know if Mary, or we're also missing two of our board members. I know that, again, I'll state that it's a lot to digest. So I would like to accept your request of putting you on the February 25th meeting. And I would like to encourage our planning board members to go back over everything and see if you can come up with any more questions or comments that you can provide as input on the 25th. And well, maybe before we move any further, let me just ask a couple of our professionals. Greg, if you are able, is there anything that you think should be brought up at this point in the proceeding that the planning board should know or consider as part of what we're inputting to the applicant?
Wanda and I did meet with the applicant on a couple occasions with regards to stormwater. There are new stormwater regulations from 2009 where we've been working with the engineer, and they will be, they know that they need to comply with those. We got into some of the discussion about the, and that's where the public road discussion came in with regards to how stormwater is managed, either on a commercial site or within public areas. So that was one of the discussions. With regards to water and sewer, the plans that were conceptually or conceptualized back in 2009 really don't change. There's some minor changes to the quantities, but nothing significant that would have any impact on the conceptual plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Absolutely.
This goes to Greg and Steve. We have two hydrants, Steve, in town, not in town center, but in LaGrange, where we can fill up a tanker truck in the case of emergency or a fire. One being on Fireman's Way, right outside the firehouse. The other one being over at Mike Kelly's superintendent's garage. Is there a way, Greg and Steve, that we can get some type of hydrant in this TCB area or this project that can have enough pressure to fill a tanker and a
Absolutely. The town is currently in the process of, listening to them regarding the Blandings turtles and the Indiana bats. I think we've gotten through that. We're currently in the process of putting additional storage at the end, water storage at the end of Frederick Drive, I think it is. And
Timothy Drive?
Timothy Drive, sorry. I knew Frederick didn't sound right. Timothy Drive, and a 12-inch water main paralleling the existing 8-inch water main coming down the hill, which would basically terminate at the town center, which the town center development paid for the 12-inch water main to cross the roundabout when that work was being done. So that would significantly improve fire flow in the town center development area, as well as the town center in general. It would just then be a matter, hydrants will be located throughout the development. It would just be a matter of selecting one that's conveniently located that you can safely, without creating traffic issues, pull up a fire truck or tanker truck and fill the tanker truck.
So we could work on putting that on the plan so we know where the fire department can go in case of an emergency.
As I'm sure, Steve Rieger, I'm kind of speaking for you. I'm sure we could look, it's a matter, there's going to be fire hydrants throughout the development. It's a matter of identifying one that would be well located, and surely we could then work with the fire department to designate that one, that as being one that they could use. But right. Generally speaking, most of the fire hydrants, with the improvements that I just mentioned, most of the fire hydrants within the town center are going to have well over 1,500 gallons a minute flow and in some cases, potentially 2,000, 2,500. So
That'll work,
it
right?
carries a lot of water.
Great,
So Greg, you're telling us that there'll be fire flows throughout this section of town center.
Correct. That was a primary requirement as part of the development of the conceptual plans, is being able to provide fire flow throughout the town center development.
And they would be able to sprinkle buildings if they have to.
Correct.
Projected date, Greg, do you know?
Well, as far as the work that's going on, we're going to try to put it out to bid here in the next month or two.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Last, we thought we were there, and then they said we needed a frack out plan because we're doing some directional drilling. So we got that back to them. So hopefully we're there.
Great, thank you. Good to know, thanks.
I'll also now ask, Lisa, I'll ask you to answer a similar question to what I asked Greg. Anything that we as a planning board should be thinking about at this point in this early stage?
Yeah, so right now the planning board has two possible paths forward. One is the one that's requested by the applicant, which is the drafting of a final EIS statement, and we'll call it a proposed so we don't get it confused with the DEIS. And from everything we've heard, that seems to be the appropriate path, because the alternative path is to do a supplemental environmental impact statement, which comes with a whole mess of regulatory things boxes that would need to be checked, et cetera. And the only time you would need to do that is if there was a significant adverse environmental impact that was not contemplated by the DEIS. And based on what we've heard tonight and what we've heard preliminarily from water and sewer and planning, et cetera, it doesn't seem like there is anything that would be a significant adverse environmental impact that was not discussed in the DEIS. So I think the path that the applicant is suggesting in doing a proposed final is fine, understanding that the plans that are before the board right now are somewhat conceptual, and it's possible that something may come up in the future, but I don't see any roadblocks to the path that the applicant's proposed right now.
Right. And if something were to come up in the future, we can always
You can always
switch
determine
to,
at a future date that a supplemental EIS is needed for whatever reason. If you find that there is suddenly a significant adverse environmental impact that wasn't contemplated by the DEIS, that's always available to the board. So
I have a quick question.
sure.
yes, Mary.
Do either of these involve a new traffic study? Do we use the
Both of them do.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, there will be a new traffic study done. I don't think the traffic is going to be that different, and I won't speak for Mr. Greeley. I see he's on the phone, but it's not anticipated to be that much different from what was proposed in the DEIS, particularly since the DEIS contemplated doing 2 roundabouts, which now exist. So we're just anticipating that the numbers will need to be updated, but that there won't be any significant adverse environmental impacts due to the current proposal.
Yeah, I was also just anticipating that when we open this to the public, I'm sure it will be one of the first questions that we get.
Absolutely.
And we will have, I would anticipate that we would have the draft final, the proposed final, and have the board work through it a bit before we set a public hearing, so that we can make sure that the board is comfortable with the document before, because if there's stuff in there that they're not comfortable with, there's no point in soliciting public comments on it if it's not going to be in the final anyway. And then we will have a public hearing when this is further along, so that the public can weigh in and give their input.
Okay, that's it, because Mark and he asked all my other questions.
And that brought up another point, Mary. Within that, make sure that wherever you're considering school bus stops in your traffic study, make sure that your turning radiuses on all those roads where you're going to have school bus pickups will work. Because Arlington, even though you live next door to Arlington, they still make you ride the school bus.
That's a good point. So actually mentioning the some of the future, I think it might be an appropriate point to talk a little bit about future meetings that relate to this topic. One of the things that we had discussed, myself and Jennifer and Lisa, was the potential for keeping the town center in its own set of special meetings that are a second meeting for the planning board during the month. And if we did that, it would probably be best to do it on the second Thursday of the month. But in thinking about that, there's some timing potential problems in that. So let's say you come in on February 25th and you get our approval to go ahead with your draft EIS. If we specify the second Thursday in March, that only gives you essentially 2.5 weeks to do whatever you might need to prepare to come into that next meeting. If we skip that meeting because it's too soon, that puts you into the middle of April, and that's probably too long for you folks. So I'm not saying we have to work through that at this point, but I think it's an important question because we don't want to hold you up, but we also need sufficient time to deliberate on what we get from you. So I think there's a staging thing, and we can. I'll kind of task Jennifer and Eileen and Lisa to work with your side of the fence to maybe come up with a proposal on how we could do that works for everybody. Again, I don't want to cause a problem for you. Does that sound okay, Lisa?
Okay with me.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead, Jennifer. I was going to call on you now.
I just wanted to make a couple of comments on things that came up during the meeting. The first is the question of the phasing. And I just want to remind the applicant that the code states that in section 240-35, subsection G3, that the planning board is empowered to require that the development be phased to ensure the required mix of uses is implemented. So I just wanted to point that out because it's in the code. The second thing I wanted to mention was I think there was some discussion when we were talking about design of maintaining flexibility in some of the buildings, and Mr. Rieger pointed out that he was open to that. And I think that consideration is important regarding civic uses because they are important to the vitality of the sort of 24/7 type of community that was envisioned. Thirdly, I just want to mention that the code, actually the new code that was incorporated over the course of the many years that were, it was, I think, 2003, 2008, and then 2013 or 14, a number of changes were made to the designs of streets in the town center business to reduce the turning radius because it was considered significant as a design feature for neo-traditional design, new urbanism type of neighborhood. So if that being the case, if there's the need for circulation for school buses, that should be looked at as not the dominant pattern, but as something that can be accommodated in areas, but not in all, especially the streets that are meant to have that intimate walking scale, pedestrian scale.
All right. All right, sounds good. Is the planning board comfortable at this point? I believe that it's reasonable for us to consider taking the draft EIS approach versus the supplemental, and with the provision that we may have to, if something significant comes up, that we may have to take that path in the future. Is there any other discussion about that with the planning board? Mary, Randy, Dennis,
Not I.
Mark,
Not I,
Stacy, everybody okay with that idea?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, I think they've more than done their due diligence environmentally. Yes, I agree.
Thank you. All right,
Thank
so
you very much.
obviously we may come up with a few more comments for you at the 25th, the meeting on the 25th. But I think we've given you something to work on in the interim. And is there anything else that anybody else would like to bring up?
Mark,
Applicant?
I mean, Chris, are we going to officially vote on that at our next meeting then, at our regular meeting?
Yes, I think the request was that the authorization would be done on the 25th. So yes, we would be doing that at that time.
Okay, thank you.
So Christian, when will the determination be made for the next special meeting from the applicant?
I'm going to ask our professionals to work with the applicants and to just try to work out a usable schedule that we can propose, and then we'll run that past the planning board, because obviously you have to work on your own availability as well, and we'll just have to work that out. I'd like to target that, maybe settling that in the next 2 weeks.
Great.
And from there we can go. Does that seem reasonable, Lisa, Jennifer?
Sure. Yeah, the applicant has a little bit of homework to do between now and submitting their proposed FEIS. So we'll wait to hear in part from them about when they think they'll be ready, and then we'll work toward finding a date that works for everyone.
Okay, very good. Mr. Rieger, anybody else on your side would like to make any additional comments before we break up?
I think I'm okay. I think Lisa's right that we'll have work to do in preparing the FEIS. So we'll have to caucus and figure out how long it's going to take us to make a submission.
And
Jennifer, you have something?
Well, I would just add that when we do submit the proposed FEIS, obviously we'll give the board the time that it needs to review that. Lisa Cobb has already made the point to us that the board will want to have sufficient time to review the document, and clearly it is your document, so you'll have whatever time you need to review it, and we'll try to coordinate our completion of the document so that it will be submitted with respect to the date we set for our meetings, whether it's going to be on a schedule that's different than your regular meeting schedule. I think that certainly makes sense, to have a special meeting night, because everybody can focus on this as a larger project. But
Right.
we'll coordinate with Jennifer and with Lisa dates that work.
I think the intention, just to make it clear, because again, this board has never really been through a pause deck except for Dennis and I. So I just wanted to let you know that it's the schedules meetings would be more instead of like in the past where a project comes in, we look at it, we discuss it, and then they go away and come back. There'd be more like workshop meetings. So if you make a lot of changes to some of our suggestions, say like what we did tonight, our next scheduled meeting, you would come back in maybe with where you think our changes would work, or give us some ideas. It's more like a workshop kind of thing. So it's not like you're going to go away and you're going to make an FEIS and come back. It's a work in progress. So you might change some things, come in, say, what about this? This looks good to you, this good, and we do a little workshop thing, and you go away, and then but in the meantime, you're working on the big stuff, which will not change technically, which is your traffic and your stormwater and your water, sewer, and all that kind of stuff. That stuff's big. I'm talking the little changes and the little tweaks here and there that we can talk back and forth in these workshops.
Mhm.
So I think that's the idea Chris was having when he was talking about we're going to have a meeting schedule of meetings. It's not just going because that way we have time to sit and actually workshop it, you know, instead of just sit there and go, I just sat through a 5-hour meeting. I don't want to go. I don't want to get into this right now.
Okay,
Right.
the one thing I'd like to say is, and I know this isn't necessarily a fair comment, but time is important. You know, we've been gone a long time, and the market now will allow us, if we can get this approved, will allow us to finance, you know, significant parts of this project. And so we would like to start the project in the market, in the economic climate that we're in, where there's opportunity. And so, you know, to the extent that we can expedite the pace of this review, we'd appreciate that. I know it's not fair because it's been a long time, but time is an issue. So.
Well, you know, that's why we thought the workshops on a schedule basis would work great, because that way we can be tweaking here while you guys are doing the big work in the background.
Yeah, we appreciate
You
that.
know?
I understand.
And it's in everybody's best interest that we all do the best job possible with this. We're all going to have to live in this town afterwards. And, I look forward to, creating an environment that we all want to be able to live and pass through. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Can you tell I watched Forrest Gump the other day?
Oh, then you were one of those green squares in the little town center on a park bench.
That's right. That's exactly what it was. All right. If no one else has anything more, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Stacy,
Second.
Randy seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
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 8:48.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank
your
you very
time.
much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good
Nice
night,
to see you
everyone.
all.
See
Take care,
everybody on
everybody.
Saturday.